Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 car death scenes in movies. From high-speed crashes to explosions and heart-stopping plunges over the edge, death by car has often proved to be one of the most popular vehicles for filmmakers when it comes to delivering high-impact drama in death scenes. Of all the meet your maker in a motor scenes to ever be captured on celluloid, here is a video with the very best.
Number 10. Thelma Louise from 1991. Starring Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis, Ridley Scott's acclaimed road movie celebrating female rebellion and friendship follows two women as they embark on a trip away from their suffocating lives. But their journey of liberation and self-discovery soon turns into a nightmare when, after killing a sexual attacker, they become outlaws. The film culminates with an iconic scene as the duo find themselves trapped by the police at the edge of the Grand Canyon. Rather than accept capture and imprisonment, they decide to end it all, driving their Thunderbird convertible over the precipice. The story ends with a freeze frame of the car in midair against the symbolic backdrop of the Great Open, a poignant, unseen death. Number 9. Death Proof from 2007, and this video is seriously non-safe for work, so don't watch it if you're not prepared for this. Quentin Tarantino's anti-hero horror thriller tale depicts the murderous exploits of a sadistic stuntman, played by Kurt Russell, who hunts down younger women and kills them in staged collisions with his death-proof car. Tarantino's preference for real action sequences rather than CGI in the collision scenes lends a brutal authenticity to the crashes. The most violent and gruesome of these involves 4 women, whose points of death include being thrown from the vehicle, dismemberment, and even a close-up of a face being run over. And all are individually shown for extra squirm factor. Number 8. Final Destination 2 from 2003. David R. Ellis's sequel to 2000's Final Destination is a horror flick based on the simple premise that you can't cheat death. After one character's premonition of a fatal disaster, events inevitably follow to turn her worst fears into reality. And so the film continues, with each of the characters being killed off in unfortunate and seemingly fluke circumstances. One such incident is an orgiastic vehicle pileup involving multiple victims after a logging truck loses its load and causes carnage. The sequence, in which a motorcyclist, a garbage truck, and various cars are wiped out, is often referred to as one of the best car crash scenes in cinema to date, and even won an MTV Movie Award for Best Action Sequence. Number 7. Mad Max from 1979. The dystopian fantasy by George Miller is set in an Australian gangland of the future, awash with motorcycles and souped-up rides, and it stars Mel Gibson as Mad Max, a cop bent on retribution for the deaths of his family. He finally gets his revenge on the barbaric gang leader Toe Cutter during a high-speed pursuit in which Toe Cutter, riding a Kawasaki Z100, is forced into the path of an oncoming semi-truck thanks to the driving skills of Mad Max and the supercharger of his special pursuit. Toe Cutter's body is violently crushed and torn apart under the truck's wheels. Just before impact, in an apparent and amusing reference to old cartoons, we see Toe Cutter remove his goggles, his eyes almost popping out of his head as he faces his impending doom. Number 6. RoboCop from 1987. Paul Verhoeven's sci-fi law enforcement flick set in the crime-riddled city of Detroit in the near future is an over-the-top and ultra-violent resurrection story. After being brutally executed by a local crime boss, a rookie policeman, played by Peter Weller, is chosen to be the first candidate to be resurrected and turned into a cyborg cop by a mega-corporation that believes the city's human police force is incapable of controlling crime levels. During an encounter with one of his original murderers at a local steel mill, one of the gang members tries to kill RoboCop by running him over with a van, but instead crashes into a container of toxic waste. He emerges a living zombie with his destroyed flesh hanging from his bones and walks into the path of an oncoming car. In a particularly gruesome death, his already destroyed body is annihilated by the collision, and his decapitated head slides across the windscreen in a wash of blood and gore. Number 5. Vanilla Sky from 2001. Cameron Crowe's reinterpretation of Alejandro Amenabar's Abre los Ojos, Open Your Eyes, featuring a star-studded cast including Tom Cruise, Penelope Cruz, and Cameron Diaz, is a sci-fi psychological thriller exploring the theme of cryonic suspension, among others. In an early, fateful scene, the lead male character is powerless to prevent a horrific crash when his ex-lover, who is driving erratically and at high speed, deliberately drives the car they're both in off a bridge in a revenge murder-suicide bid. While she dies, it appears that he, though horribly disfigured, survives, though the course of his life has been permanently altered. Number 4. The Italian Job from 1969. Peter Collinson's cult British heist movie with Michael Caine and Noel Coward is a riot of Mini Coopers and daring do. The job: steal a $4 million haul of gold from under the very noses of the Italian mafia. After a legendary car chase through Turin, it seems the robbery and subsequent escape have been successful. That is, until their getaway coach, which by this point has been loaded with the gold bullion, loses control on a hairpin bend. The crew find themselves teetering on the edge of a cliff, with the weight of their stash threatening to tip them over the edge. A literal cliffhanger, the film ends in the touch and go of the crew attempting to save themselves and their precious cargo. Although the final outcome is left deliberately open to interpretation, as the credits roll, the outlook for the gang doesn't look too good. Number 3. Meet Joe Black from 1998. Martin Brest's fantastical romantic drama starring Brad Pitt, Anthony Hopkins, and Claire Forlani relates an imagining of death living among the living. In one of the film's earlier scenes, the central female character, after being affected by a conversation on life and love with her father, who believes he is not long for this world, happens to meet a striking young man with whom she feels an instant connection. Immediately after their encounter, and in one of the most unsuspected car death scenes in cinema, the young man is run over by 2 cars in immediate succession. The sheer suddenness of this scene, coupled with the violent way in which the character's body is flung between the 2 cars that collide with him, somehow contrived to make this sequence unexpectedly humorous as well as shocking. The corpse is later chosen by death to be his body in life. Number 2. Bonnie and Clyde, 1967. Arthur Penn's taboo-breaking biopic features the exploits of the infamous Depression-era outlaws played by Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. In one of the bloodiest death scenes in cinema history, the notorious duo are betrayed and meet their end in a police ambush. The lovers and their car are riddled by machine gun fire from law enforcement agents concealed in nearby bushes. Number 1. Kick-Ass from 2010. Matthew Vaughn's superhero action film based on a comic of the same name and starring Nicolas Cage, Aaron Johnson, and Chloe Moretz tells the story of an ordinary teenager who decides to become a superhero, Kick-Ass. However, he soon finds himself coming into contact with action heroes of a higher caliber and more violent nature, Big Daddy and Hit Girl, a father-daughter team focused in their pursuit of the villain Frank D'Amico. In one scene, Big Daddy and Hit Girl interrogate one of D'Amico's goons while he is handcuffed to the steering wheel of a yellow Range Rover in a scrapyard car crusher. Showing no mercy, Hit Girl activates the machine after extracting the required information from her captive, and the victim is crushed to death within the compressor, splattering blood over the car and windshield as he explodes. After this gory conclusion, the car crusher produces a neat cube of compressed metal.
So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you have any to add to that list, some famous car death scenes that we missed, do let us know in the comments below. We'd love to read about them. Also, if you did like this video, do show it by clicking that like button below the video now, and do subscribe if you haven't already to our channel, because we put out brand new videos just like this 7 days a week. So click that subscribe button on the screen now or in the description if you're on a mobile device. Also, over there on the right, a couple of other videos you'll probably enjoy. One is the top 10 famous people who died in real-life car accidents. That one's a bit more morbid. And below that, we've got another morbid one about death, because we're really morbid, the top 10 death predictions that came true. Check those out, and thank you for watching.